So I think she's, because I got a message from her too. She said I just got in, but she keeps saying the host is starting the meeting. So we probably have to get it.
Welcome everyone. Again, my name is Gerald Brewer. I'm the chair of the City of Aurora's REACT committee. And I'd just like to thank you all for taking time out of your schedule to delve into Black history a little bit more. And we have some very distinguished guests here that I just can't wait to hear from. So I'm going to cut my piece very short, just saying once again, welcome, and let's get started.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Brewer. Now I have the privilege and distinct honor of introducing our Chief of Police, Vanessa Wilson. Chief, please, I'm going to turn it over to you to have a few remarks.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to thank all the groups that have come together, REACT, YASPA, the Youth NAACP, and just everyone that is really to have these real conversations. And really, I'm just here to listen and learn and just really see all of this through the eyes of the youth. And I think we've seen the revolution that's occurred across the nation, demanding, not just asking, but demanding police reform, and the fact that people are coming together and it's happening right before our eyes. And this is going to be your world. And so I'm excited to hear your thoughts on as we move forward.
Thank you, Chief Wilson. And I do want to acknowledge our elected officials that have joined us. I see you in the audience. Thank you so much for being here on this evening. Now I'm going to turn it over for really why we're here on this evening, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Janice Mackey. She's a phenomenal person who I've had the privilege of being able to interact with a little bit more as time has gone on. I'm going to read her bio, and I'm sure the bio could go on and on and on, but she's blessed us with condensing it for us. But I do want to take the time and make sure that we do acknowledge the work that she's put in. So I'm going to, if you would indulge me for just one moment as I read her bio. Dr. Janice Mackey is the co-founder and executive director of Young Aspiring Americans for Social and Political Activism, or YASPA, an organization that provides a conduit for youth of color to become civically engaged in their communities and careers. Mackey is a teacherpreneur for YASPA, has a zealous commitment to social justice and for creating innovative experiences for youth interests in social science careers. Through YASPA, Mackey leads scholarship fairs, social science institutes, and teaches a course entitled Civic Engagement in Community and Career. She has launched a partnership between YASPA and the Community College of Aurora Foundation's Aurora Gives program to provide social science students with a 2-year scholarship. Mackey is a PhD student in curriculum and instruction with a public policy emphasis at the University of Denver and currently serves as an adjunct faculty in political science. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Janice Mackey.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. That's really humbling. Good evening, everyone. I also am not going to be doing much talking this evening because if you all have come to any of our events, we really believe that you should claim all the space, right? I was very excited when I was approached about honoring the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And with that and Women's History Month coming up, as my eldest daughter reminded me, I also want to bring some women into the space, right? So Asada Shakur, Audre Lorde, Patricia Hill Collins, and local living legends as well. Our partner with the Aurora NAACP, President Montgomery, Crystal Gillis, who holds it down as well, right, with our youth and collaborative healing space, and the rest of our team. So I'm super excited to be in this space, and particularly to ensure youth claim all this space. So thank you so much for having us. And I'm going to kick it over to Brandy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brandy, and I attend Smoky Hill High School. And I am also one of the founders of Black History Spirit Week, which is going on this week. We are now going to open up introductions of our fellow youth panelists. Please share your name and the school you attend.
Hi, my name is Rohan Budanti, and I am a junior at Smoky Hill High School, which is in Aurora, Colorado.
Hello, my name is Araya Johnson, and I'm a senior at Eagle Crest High School, which is in Aurora, Colorado.
Hello, my name is Adeloit, and I am a junior at Hinckley High School, located in Aurora, Colorado.
Hi, my name is Bianca, and I'm a junior at Smoky Hill in Aurora, Colorado.
Hello, I'm Jason Huang. I am a junior at Hinckley High School, which is located in Aurora, Colorado.
Hi, my name is Ashley Chapone. I am a junior at Hinckley High School, which is located in Aurora, Colorado.
Hello, my name is Onyx Oates. I'm a senior at Hinckley High School, which is located in Aurora, Colorado.
Hi, my name is Stacey Ardimu. I'm a sophomore at Collegiate Prep Academy, which is in Denver, Colorado.
Hello, I'm Valeria Costa, and I'm a junior at Rangeley High School, which is also in Aurora, Colorado.
While we are not all Black identifying students, we know that we have a role in honoring Black minds and lives.
We are excited to share varying lenses of the letter from Birmingham jail through speeches, poetry, reflections, and questions.
In order to ground us in reflections, I will first share a poem I created based upon my reading of the letter from Birmingham jail. A little girl living in a time where racial segregation took a child's opportunity to be a child. When being a Black parent meant you have to give the talk about why you can't do certain things because of the melanin woven into your body. When explaining the truth about society to your child is like watching a fire dim down the heartbreak she feels when she sees that every opportunity that was dangled in front of her like a carrot to a rabbit was not for her. You watch her petals wilt begin, wishing it gets better.
My speech will be about the part in the letter from Birmingham jail. The part is, you warmly commended the Birmingham police force for keeping order and preventing violence. I don't believe you would have so warmly commended the police force if you had seen its angry, violent dogs literally biting six unarmed, nonviolent Black folks. I don't believe you would have so quickly commended the policemen if you would observe their ugly and inhuman treatment of Black folks here in the city jail. If you would watch them push and curse old Black women and young Black girls, if you would see them slap and kick old Black men and young boys, if you would observe them as they really did on 2 occasions, refusing to give us food because we wanted to sing our grace together. I'm sorry that I can't join you in this praise for the police department. I think this is just like a beautiful part of the letter that stands out to me. I think that one of our biggest challenges as a society is we refuse to see the other side of things. People look at things from a one-eyed lens and refuse to speak on things they don't know anything about. Dr. King calls out all those people supporting the police department because he knows who they truly are. Black people to this day are forced to view things differently in order to save our life. If we go through life thinking that the whole world is good, then it could cost us our life. I also think that the way that King addressed the situation was not just professional, but also forced the people he was writing to really think about what they're supporting.
Next, I will be sharing a speech based on this quote. It says, "First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection." My speech goes, This quote rings painfully true to my experience today, especially as a young Black woman born and raised in Colorado. You are surrounded by nothing but white moderates. It reminds me of something that happened a couple months ago. My family and I went out for a family dinner to celebrate my father's 50th birthday. He was dressed to the nines in his favorite suit and beaming. I remember watching him maneuver his way through the restaurant and was stopped by a middle-aged white woman. By the time he had finished his interaction with this woman, the smile had been wiped off his face. When he got to the table, we asked him what happened. He said that the woman asked him if he worked there. That same night, while we were enjoying our dinner, another white woman came up to us and said she just wanted to let us know that she supports Black Lives Matter. Then she proceeded to fold her fingers into a fist and walk away with that fist raised. In this quote, Dr. King speaks about this idea of negative peace, which is the absence of tension, opposed to positive peace, which is the presence of justice. As a young Black woman in Colorado, the idea of negative peace has been beaten into me by my white moderate surroundings. It's the idea that we do not live in the South and that this is the first state to legalize marijuana, or that this is a purple state and more recently a blue state. Simply put, racism just isn't that bad here. But as Dr. King put it, there is much more bewildering aspect to the lukewarm acceptance than outright rejection. I'm sure the first time an ignorant white person assumed my father was the help, he was able to chalk it up as an innocent mistake. The first couple of times I'd watched it happen to my father, I did too, but then it kept happening. And that instance at the restaurant was not the first time a white person had used me or my family as a sounding board for their white guilt. Instances such as these begin to gnaw at you. You're surrounded by the notion that you apparently live around woke white people, the ones supposedly doing the work. People who say, as Dr. King put it, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with the methods of your direct action. And the reason they cannot agree with our means of direct action is because there's no acknowledgement that they too are the issue. They force us into a subdued state of negative peace and calm fires with lukewarm acceptance, law and order, and performative reforms to appease us.
That was amazing. So the quote that I had chose, reads, I had hoped that the white moderate would see this. Maybe I was too optimistic. Maybe I expected too much. I guess I should have realized that few members of a race that has oppressed another race can understand or appreciate the deep groans and passionate yearnings of those that have been oppressed. And still fewer have the vision to see that injustice must be rooted out by our strong, persistent, and determined action. When reading this quote, it makes me think back to this past summer when a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests were pretty big. And it makes me think of when I would post on social media about what I was being involved in and what I would see. I would have like white folks there was definitely ones that supported what was going on, but there was also a few who seemed to want to argue and would pretty much try and invalidate what I was saying and why I supported these things. And no matter how many times and how many people that I talked to and I tried to convince that, that this was a good cause and something to be involved in, it didn't change who they were. So it makes me think, like, going back to this quote, why should I expect for anyone who believes who believes what they believe, and for me to sit here and try and convince them to believe what I believe? They're not going to. And you could try and they could see it with their own eyes, but if they have their beliefs already rooted, there's nothing too much I can do, which has been something I've had to cope with, because no matter how hard you push at somebody to see what you see, it's not always going to happen. So that's kind of what this quote made me feel.
I just like to say I love what you said, and so I had a question for mine, which was, in King's eyes, how did the church mess up, and does he believe informing people of their mess up will help change the movement?
So in my eyes, I think what um, Dr. King was trying to explain to the church is that they were kind of putting their comfort above human rights and trying to kind of minimize what Black people were feeling at the time, because they were constantly insisting that it was more important to have peace and to wait until there was a time when Black people could truly find their rights. And what Dr. King was pointing out was that that came from a place of privilege. It's a privilege to be able to say, I want to wait for someone else's freedom. And it's a privilege to say that I don't want you to get your freedom right now. And Dr. King's goal was hopefully that they understood that. And I think that's something that you can still see today. For example, during the Black Lives Matter protests, you saw a lot of people who were saying, you know, why do they need to protest now? Or, you know, why have they participated in riots? And the thing is, if you peacefully protest again and again and no change comes out of it, then at some point you need to find another way to express yourself. And a lot of people were talking about how their comfort was diminished or how they felt upset or unsafe, when that's the reality for Black people every day, because they've been trying to be heard for so long. And I think that's a similar message to what Dr. King was saying here. So I think his main goal was education, because I think privilege can be one of the most powerful ways of providing ignorance to people. So. All right, and with that, I am also going to speak now, and I am also doing quote 9. So as a reminder, this was, first, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been greatly disappointed with the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal that you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. And so when I think of this quote, I actually think of my family and my community during the Black Lives Matter protests. I am not Black, I'm Asian American. My parents immigrated from India when 20 years ago. So we are a community of color, but we're not a Black community. And the things that I heard my community say during that time, I thought were abhorrent. They were suggesting, for example, that George Floyd deserved what happened to him because he was having a panic attack, really, and because he had used drugs previously. I had people kind of suggest to me that what Kyle Rittenhouse had done was justified because he was trying to keep the peace. And I had a lot of people, even within my own family, try and tell me that there should be a specific way that people were protesting during these Black Lives Matter movements. And to me, it was so frustrating because we are also a community of color. We have also experienced racism and oppression for so long. We've also been told that we are not Americans, but yet here we were playing the role of the white moderate, because truly we live in a white supremacist society. And in many ways, I almost saw it as a form of assimilation, because it's so much easier to side with the white moderate and say, okay, well, I'm not going to agree with how these Black people are protesting and how these Black people are fighting for their rights, when truly it's not our place to say whether or not someone deserved to be murdered, first of all. And it's not our place to say, oh, they should be protesting this way, or they're disrupting my peace, because their human rights are human rights. The Black community has been fighting for this for so long. And yet here we are as another community of color trying to tell Black people that they cannot protest for their own rights. And I also think of my friends, because a lot of my friends are what would be known as the woke white person, or the progressive white person who supports these racial justice movements and thinks that because of that, they are free to say whatever they want. Because there's so many times during the summer that they try to kind of say that, oh, this is so wrong, the way that Black people are protesting. They are causing violence and disrupting the peace. When to me, what that suggested was my comfort is being disrupted because another group is fighting for their rights. And to me, I was always so frustrated because they seem to think that because they supported racial justice and because they supported Black Lives Matter, they had a get out of jail free card to criticize the Black community as they please, when really we need to spend time understanding why things like this have been happening and seek to address those issues. And I think the white moderate is universal, and it's something that exists throughout time. For example, I recently had someone send a meme to me that was something along the lines of telling someone they have white privilege is judging them for the color of their skin, and it had Martin Luther King photoshopped on. And to me, what that was saying was, I don't like it when you tell me that I've benefited from a system. I don't want to feel like I've benefited from a system, even though that's an important part of fighting for racial equality. And that still connects to the idea of the white moderate, because the white moderate doesn't like to be told that they are in positions of power, that they have benefited. They like to acknowledge that there's injustices, but not recognize that they are a part of it. And so I just really think that kind of the overall, I think, connection between all these stories is that the white moderate's not gone. That's not something that's disappeared. And the white moderate is kind of, it's universal, and it's not just a white person, it's not just moderates, it's so many people who have obstructed the way that Black people are trying to fight for their rights. Sorry, that kind of, that was a kind of a long-winded speech, but I also have a question that I think some people are going to answer. So this also connects back to what I was saying in my speech, but during the summer, there were many non-Black Americans who criticized the Black Lives Matter protest because they disagreed with the type of protest done. Do you also think this exhibits the behavior of the white moderate, and why or why not?
I could answer that question. I wanted to preface this assertion by saying that there are many people who partook in the Black Lives Matter protest who weren't truly there for the cause and simply wanted to cause havoc within the protest. And thus, I feel like a lot of white moderates have somehow used this as an anchor to discredit the Black Lives Matter protest, because at the end of the day, the Black Lives Matter protest wasn't to wreak havoc among their own cities. It was a call for better justice towards the Black community and to dissolve the egregious injustices that disproportionately affect Black Americans to this day. And I believe that this is a perfect embodiment of the white moderate, because truly, if they are placing too much emphasis on protesters that were not truly there for the cause and for the violence, then they're only criticizing the protests because it lacked order. But it's not about whether or not a protest lacks order. As long as it is doing its right thing and calling authorities and administrators to actually place more just systems and policies in place, I think that is all that matters. And as a white moderate, or not as a white moderate, but I feel like that is kind of a parallel to like the white savior complex. A lot of, as Rohan alluded to, there are a lot of white moderates that think they're woke, but truly they are just inflicting a lot of harm on the Black community. So I feel like it is time for white moderates to be more aware of their actions and to not place emphasis on trying to create order, but rather placing emphasis on trying to foster justice. So.
So I wanted to go a little bit off of what Jason said. Mostly because I'm like, I agree with what she said about as a person. I feel like that the white moderate, I feel like what's dangerous about people who are white moderates is that they tend to, like, their beliefs and their actions tend to not align with each other. They tend to believe one thing, but they criticize another thing, and they don't take their actions as the same way, sort of thing. And I feel like that's almost, intimidating and also a little bit scary as people, because I'm like, okay, it's just like, how do you trust someone whose actions aren't the same as the way that they believe in, the way that they talk, or the way that they talk to you, but they'll act differently towards someone else in a different group of people in a different group of settings?
I think that's a very interesting point. It makes me think of just like white moderates, like pandering kind of. But the next quote I'll be sharing is from another part of the Birmingham jail, and it says, there are some instances when a law is just on the face, on its face and unjust in its application. For instance, I was arrested Friday on a charge of parading without a permit. Now, there's nothing wrong with the ordinance, which requires a permit for a parade, but when the ordinance is used to preserve segregation and to deny citizens the First Amendment privilege of peaceful assembly and peaceful protest, then it becomes unjust. And with this, I think the main point, the main thing that came to my mind was the idea of like privilege. We preach that like every day, everyone has the same rights. And on the surface, yes, that's true, but the application of those rights are very different based on your race, gender, sexual orientation, your religion even, and a bunch of different things. I mean, even in January, we saw it with the Capitol riots. Everyone said if that was Black Lives Matter, it would have been a massacre that day. And I think because of the idea of privilege, it kind of brings up another point of resentment. And so like, for example, say like there's a rule where it's like everyone can get apples, and because of this rule, you go to the grocery store and you see that there's this person named Alex and they get all the apples they want, and they get Granny Smith, Red Delicious, and all of that. And they check out, pay for it, go on their merry way. And when you want the exact same apples as Alex, the cashier rings you up and says, sorry, you're only allowed to get Honey Crisps. And yes, while Honey Crisps are like apples, and the cashier's technically not breaking the rules that anyone can get apples, they're not the apples you want. So Alex had the privilege of getting to choose their own apples, but when it comes to you, you're just forced to choose one, which is discrimination. And it's not as cut and dry as apples, but, and forgive me if this analogy is a bit like silly, but I think it's a very like, I guess, basic analogy that could lead to a bigger conversation. So back to the apples, the application of this rule can jumpstart a bunch of things like resentment, whether it's for the actual law, the cashier, the grocery store you're at, Alex. It can also jumpstart your prejudice towards these things and people. And so it's just pounding in the like deep divide of that we don't need, frankly. We don't need to be more divided as we are right now. And so I think because of these laws that and these instances, we have to be careful where it's, yeah, it looks good on the surface, but the application needs to also be good. It can't just be like, okay. And with these laws, I think it's actually quite dangerous because it's like people will point to the law and be like, no, it says blah, blah, blah. That's a good thing. But there's a lot of baggage when it comes to that. And so I think it just creates a ripple effect of how like people see the world. The more the more people misuse the application of certain laws, frankly, for me, the more I get kind of scared of the world. You know, I have to constantly be like, okay, don't do this, don't do this. Yes, that's legal, but like something can go wrong. And so I think with this quote, the main idea that comes for me is just privilege, and how with privilege, the baggage is resentment. Like the effect of privilege is resentment towards whether it's from the victim of the privilege or the person benefiting from the privilege, it's going to be resentment to me. And my question, sorry if that was a long-winded speech too. My question is basically to my fellow panelists, what example outside of the civil rights era can you give where a law on the surface looks plausible, but has a constant misuse in its application?
I can answer this question. I know the way that Ashley so beautifully put it, like my answer doesn't necessarily completely like connect to it, but it's the best example that I can think of. I think of affirmative action, and like who affirmative action ends up helping. So I think there's like studies that came out that says like affirmative action actually has benefited white women the most. And there is also the idea that her liberation is tied to mine, but there's been several instances where like just people of color or people who aren't Black women have been like accused of getting opportunities because of affirmative action. And I think that just kind of plays into it, where it's like it's a law that like on its surface would seem like it would benefit me, which I think in some cases it does, but then also like I get accused, but then there's of it benefiting me and being some like unfair privilege or something. And then there's like studies that come out that say it doesn't actually completely benefit me the most.
So hi, I'll be sharing based on this quote. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have never yet engaged in a direct action movement that was well-timed. According to the timetable of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation, this wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see what the distinguished jurist of yesterday, that justice too long delayed is justice denied. We have waited for more than 340 years for our God-given and constitutional rights. So my speech to go with this is, I chose this quote because it is still very relevant to today. From what we saw in the summer with the Black Lives Matter protests, many people condemned the protests for being non-peaceful. However, as stated by Martin Luther King, people have been peaceful and oppressed for more than 300 years. Many people who condemn and put down protests for racial justice use Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech and his whole peaceful persona. However, they themselves aren't educated, as in this quote, he himself says that freedom must be demanded and direct action needs to be made, whether it be peaceful or not. Justice will never be well-timed or done correctly because oppressors or people that benefit from the oppression of others never want to grant that freedom. And I think that ties back to what we were talking about with the white moderates or just privileged groups in general, that they don't really, they talk about how they like, sorry, they have a different perspective on like, oh, maybe if they tried doing it differently, but it shouldn't be about if they're doing it right or not, it's about why they're doing it. And I think my question to this would be, how is this relevant or a parallel to what we are currently seeing today, but as well as what previous historical events can this also be said about?
I can answer this question. I think that this can be seen today because there are so many cases in which injustices happen, but to really be addressed, they have to be demanded and there has to be surmounting pressure. An example that comes to my mind is the Elijah McClain incident, because Elijah McClain was actually killed in 2019, at the end of 2019. And at the time, there was really nothing done to figure out what happened. And the officers involved were pretty much given a slap on the wrist. And it wasn't until several months later, in fact, almost a year later, with the renewed surge of the Black Lives Matter movement during the summer and the surmounting national pressure to investigate this movement, that anything happened, even though we had cops who were mocking this man, this innocent Black man that they had murdered. And I think that what that shows is that when oppression occurs, it's very, very rare that the oppressors will take it upon themselves to fix it. And very often it's the oppressed groups of people who have to demand it, demanding that what happened to Elijah McClain was events and that the officers involved were held accountable should not have been something that needed to be demanded. That's the bare minimum in my mind. But at the same time, we live in a climate where really only when news outlets start to report it, and really when people begin questioning it who aren't just that oppressed community, but the majority, does anything really happen? And I think this is something that actually occurs quite a lot, really across all communities. An example that I think of is Leonard Matlovic. So Leonard Matlovic, if you don't know, he served in the army. He had like a Purple Heart. He was a very accomplished veteran, and he came out. He came out as gay, and he was kicked out of the military. And dishonorable discharge. I believe it was not an honorable discharge. And he had to spend years fighting in the courts. He had to go almost up to the Supreme Court. I think he went to like the District Circuit Court of Appeals or something like that to demand to be put back in the Army. And even then, the Army still settled and only gave him, I think it was like a payment. Because in that case, that's the bare minimum. You shouldn't be discharged from the Army for things like your race or your sexuality, but he had to demand for that right to come back. And even after his time, it still took so long for LGBTQ plus individuals to be accepted into the Army. In fact, unfortunately today, we're still struggling to make sure that transgender people can still serve in the Army. And so I think that it's something that's applicable, I think, across so many different communities. In order to fight against injustices, it's very rarely the oppressors who will take it upon themselves. It's the oppressed who really have to make a shout and cry out for really bare minimum accountability to be taken.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you for answering my question. I agree with what you said. So to go along with some of like the quotes and speeches we've been talking about, me and Ashley, we made paintings that aren't just about the quotes from Letter from Birmingham Jail, but as well as Black History Month in general, because I think it's really important for in Black History Month to, you know, celebrate / acknowledge the accomplishments that African Americans have, you know, done, even though they are, you know, a group that is heavily oppressed in like many ways. So to start off, what the concept of like the painting me and Ashley did was like the past versus present, showing how there's like kind of like similarities between like what people have accomplished or what they have done for Black lives. So this is my painting. It's very word heavy in a sense that it's kind of like a newspaper, but it's inverted. And basically, it's Black History Month. And then the date I used was July 2nd, 1964 for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And then this column on like a newspaper type, it's just names of people who did a lot for like the civil rights movement. You know, you have people like Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, some lesser known, I guess, or like said names such as John Lewis, Dorothy Height. And then over here we have more like events / things that are speeches such as the I Have a Dream speech, the Montgomery bus boycott, sit-ins, you know, general stuff. And then over here is kind of I like music, so I decided to do musicians that around the 60s, such as Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis, Diana Ross, Aretha Franklin. And then this spot, I specifically chose young people because like ourselves, you know, we're trying to do change, or even if they didn't mean to, they were still pretty big names from that time, such as Claudette Colvin, Ruby Bridges, and Emmett Till. So that's my painting, if Ashley wants to show hers.
Okay. Yeah, so I had, this is my painting. I don't know if you can see it, but it's formatted like it's a tablet, and then you're on like a news article site. And so I'm doing the present, and okay. And so basically what I have here is just like like it says learn more about Black Lives Matter, which is pretty much like one of the biggest movements and events of the like 21st century. And so you can't just like leave it out. And then from here, it says from Shirley Chisholm to Kamala Harris. And if you don't know, Shirley Chisholm was the first African-American woman to be a senator. And Kamala Harris, as you know, is the first vice president of color and a woman. And so it says learn more here too. And so I just wanted to like put those accomplishments in like politics, as well as down here where it says from Maya Angelou to Amanda Gorman, so poetry and writing, which is a big part of like Black culture and all that. And then down here, it just says, hear our voices, which I think, I mean, goes without saying, is a big, I guess, saying for not just the Black community, but people of color or people who have been oppressed, just hear our voices. Over here, I kind of went ham on like the entertainment part because I really like talking about how Black people have contributed to the entertainment industry. And it says today's top hits. And okay, I added some songs from like 3 years ago, but it's still good. It's still today in my mind. And so we have Savage, Say So, This Is America, Ballin', and Chanel. And so I recommend you go check out those songs. And it just goes to show how big those songs were. Like to this day, I'm pretty sure like everyone knows the song Savage by Megan Thee Stallion and all of that. And so it just goes to show how much power Black people hold in the music industry, I guess. And so next is Black stories. And so again, with entertainment, I just wanted to talk about like movies with like Black stories. I think one time my brother told me while he liked the biopics and all of that, there was a lot of entertainment and stuff centering about Black pain, which he didn't find a problem at all, but he just wanted something else, like a Black fantasy witch hunter or something like that. And so I added a biopic. It's Judas and the Black Messiah. You should watch it if you haven't. It's based on a true story. And the next movie is Get Out, which is a horror movie. And it was a pretty big thing for its time because it was like, it just you relate to it. I mean, like when I first saw it, it was just like breathtaking for me, and I love horror. So I was happy to see that there was finally a horror movie with like a Black protagonist. Third, Black Panther, cultural reset. Finally, a Black superhero on the big screen, goes without saying. Also, I'm Ghanaian, so I was like, yes, Mother Africa. I was really rocking it. And then lastly, Malcolm and Marie. And I haven't watched this, but I heard it's really good. And so it's just about like Black love, something that doesn't get showcased too often. And so I just wanted to like basically talk about how Black people have put their hearts and souls out on the entertainment industry as well as politics, writing, and we just want our voices to be heard. And so that's my painting. And I guess the next thing, sorry, other than the paintings, Valeria and I did a duet, trumpet saxophone, if you don't know. I play trumpet, she plays saxophone, of the song Stand By Me by Bill E. King. We just wanted to do that song because it is like one of the most iconic songs ever. Like everyone knows Stand By Me. And it was really big for its time for a Black artist to, you know, achieve what it did. And so Valeria, if you don't mind, will you play the video? Also, if there's a lag, I am so sorry. I wish we could do this in person. Yeah.
Oh, can you guys not hear it? Sorry. Let me see. Thank you for listening.
By the way, Ashley and Villar, good job. I really love that. I'll be sharing based upon this quote from the letter from Birmingham jail. It states, "There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into an abyss of injustice where they experience the bleakness of corroding despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience." In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested and sent to jail because he and others were protesting the treatment of Blacks in Birmingham, Alabama. Unbeknownst to the American people, his experience with unfair incarceration would entail great empowerment among people of color. In the midst of social and political turmoil, America has undergone an ample surge of protests. Some were peaceful and some were violent. At the end of the day, they all feed into the historic feat towards fostering a better justice system, reforming our law enforcement, and suppressing ignorance. As we continue to hear the outcries of our people, I must say that it is time we partake in a great stride towards racial equality and a promised justice for all. However, what will it take for our nation to commence this stride? As a union, we must be no longer tolerant of the oppressive hands of racist, sexist, ableist, and homophobic bigots. Martin Luther King Jr. once said in his notorious excerpt in his letter from Birmingham jail that encouraged citizens to ensue social action due to men's unwillingness to be plunged into the abyss of despair. The unfortunate mishappenings of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Sandra Bland, and other countless innocent victims have heightened the dismal sense of despair. The archive of innocent victims suffering under the hands of oppressive and callous authorities can no longer be annexed. At some point, we must ask, when will this ever stop? The Black Lives Matter organization has questioned this for a long time. And for those of you who oppose the BLM protests, let me ask you this. How would it feel to be trampled on for centuries? How would it feel to have a society with systems that are inherently rigged to be disadvantages towards you? How would it feel when the never-ending fight towards guaranteeing a better life for equality is dismissed by people invalidating your struggles? Instead of focusing on the detriments followed by violent protests, why don't you focus on the detriments of racism as a whole? The oppressed communities are impatient. Now is the time to secure a greater future for all, and this is a movement we simply cannot hold back on. The overarching theme in Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech empowers our generations to retaliate against the egregious injustices that have been imposed upon our people. Sorry about that. I also want you to think of it this way. Visualize yourself among your peers. Give me 1 second, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry about that. So just to continue, I also want you to think of it this way. Visualize yourself among your peers at the bottom of a dark abyss. Hypothetically, injustices are no longer existent in American society. However, even if we dissolve these injustices, it is incumbent upon us to give leverage to those who have been disproportionately affected by the injustice. People are perpetually plunged into this abyss. But how do we get out of this abyss? We have to create a ladder suitable for everyone. As more people reach the top of the abyss, they assist others in climbing out of the abyss. Then, slowly yet surely, we all climb out of the abyss. After that, we must seal this abyss to prevent further damage to oppressed communities. Together, we must foster a system with just law so that we can secure an equitable life for everyone. Hence, social change does not stop once we climb out of this abyss. But in order to spark revolutionary change, we must first begin in our youth. In today's webinar, I want you to thoroughly listen to what the youth have to say about detrimental issues in our country. I also want you to consider that this is exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. wanted. He wanted active youth participation in social change. Modern society can no longer remain stagnant. I urge all of you, especially those who are part of Generation Z, to join us in this movement to make a great stride towards bettering our society. Being actively involved in your local community and expand your avenues of civic awareness and participation is what MLK endorsed. And thus, by giving honor to him, this is why youth are partaking in social action through this webinar. Thank you.
Is that our closing, Dr. Mackey?
There's one question that I would like to answer, just because I'm sorry, I'm not. But one of the questions that I would like to answer is, how do you think non-Black allies to the Black community can better serve movement of the racial equality so that they can no longer feel disappointed by Black minorities? I feel like how people of color can support the Black community, obviously, just support us in like the Black Lives Matter movement, support us like in everything, that Black people go through on a daily basis. I feel like, yeah, since 2020, it has been a struggle, and for Black people, and of course, like, well, it's always been a struggle for Black people, but like I feel like 2020 has really showed everybody's true colors, let's be real. And like I think Brandy said February 6th, no, it wasn't Brandy, I forgot who it was, but February 6th, when everything happened at the Capitol, I feel like, it was secure. We all have been dead by now. I feel like if, that was us in that type of, but I feel like, just the support, I don't know, there's a lot of non-people, I don't want to say white people, but non-people of color could do, but, it's just really support and not really, yeah, it's a lot. I don't know specifically where to start from, but yeah.
Thank you, Onyx, for answering one of those questions. That was very insightful. And I also wanted to question my fellow panelists, and I wanted to ask, describe a time when you faced any injustices, whether it was implicit or overt. What measures did you take to address it? How did you encourage others to retaliate when encountering corroding despair?
I'll answer this one. It wasn't until I started to grow up when I started to realize how much racism and injustice I started to face every day. As a kid, I always hated getting my hair done because I would always get made fun of it from a bunch of white people at school. So I got really insecure because it was as straight and long as all the other girls. But when I got to high school, I saw that a lot of the other white girls were like wearing the same white hairstyles that I was wearing. And I've never felt so disrespected and hurt in my life. It was like a slap in the face almost. And the same people that made fun of my culture were now wearing it. The advice I would give to someone who is facing injustice is to stand up for yourself. I regret all the days where I let people make fun of my culture. If I called them out on it, it would have been so beneficial to my mind and my soul. The more we allow injustice, the more it will happen.
I would like to add on to the question, but I remember I met this girl and she was not a person of color. And I know that stereotypes also fall within racial injustices. And I guess at first, like, she didn't tell me, but later on in the friendship, she expressed that, like, when she first met me, she thought that I was like gonna hurt her. And at first I was kind of weirded out, and I didn't really like know what to say, because at that point it's more like, well, do I want to, like, I don't want to come for her because we're friends for this long or whatever. But I ended up like expressing that, like, that's offensive. It's not even kind of offensive, it's really offensive to me and to other people who are feeding into the insecurities because of these types of stereotypes. Because now it got me wondering, like, do I appear as scary or this type of person, when in reality it's just a stereotype. And I feel like when it comes to retaliation, I feel like at that point you still have to stay respectful, of course, but I feel like you just have to educate them on the ignorance and the power that stereotypes have on a race and on a person. That's all I have to say for that.
And I would like to add on to that question. I feel like, I would like to answer and not add, but a time, like not even like a week ago, I had a basketball game against Brighton. Mind you, Brighton is like a preppy white school, let's be real. And they felt like, I felt like the girls or like some of the refs came off, because my coach is very like weird and hype and likes to yell a lot and just bring off of like a negative demeanor. Well, that's his fault personally, but the refs felt some type of way by and plus we're all Black on the team, so some white, but it's like it doesn't feel good when we're getting like not fair calls, like we're just getting calls just because the ref feels this type of way, and it was really unfair. Like it was just crazy how we just get, put in that type of situation because somebody makes us like look that type of way. I feel like white people just like look at us and like, oh yeah, like sneaky type of way. That's in my point of view, so that's why like you always have to don't let people give don't let them have a reason to talk to you, like don't have white people, like don't give white people a reason to look at you in a certain type of way, in my point of view, and they'll be okay, I guess. I don't know.
So I also wanted to answer, and for me, what I've experienced is when I was younger, I experienced a lot of like unfortunate like racial situations where like people didn't like my hair and I got made fun of for having hair in my skin and everything, and that I looked some sort of certain way, and I was light skinned, so they didn't quite understood who I was or what ethnicity I identified with. For me, so when I was younger, I always felt like uncomfortable because a lot of people would always tell me I was whitewashed, and I was like, what even is that? Or that I was a non-threatening Black person in the room and I wasn't scary to them. So that was the only reason why they wanted to approach me and things like that. And sometimes it made me feel unsure of actually who I was as a person, because I'm questioning everything about myself. I'm questioning whether or not my hair is okay. Should I straighten it and things like that. So for me, I would just say, because there's just so many negativity things around the world. Like I know that sometimes when I go in a white neighborhood, sometimes I feel like I should change my song and my music because I'm in a white neighborhood and I don't know if they're gonna like listening to the baby, and perhaps they would prefer some gospel music and things like that, or other things that like country. And for me, I'm just like, I shouldn't second guess myself. I shouldn't have to change myself for someone else's comfortability, because if I change myself to make someone else comfortable, I am therefore making myself officially uncomfortable because I don't know how to behave anymore around someone else just because they aren't the same color as me. So it's just like, like people are just going to hate on you. And I'm like, I don't think you should allow that to affect, what you're going to do or your judgment about other people. And, I'm just like, for me, my advice would be like, just stay who you are at the end of the day and just like focus on what's important to you and don't let the things that are surrounding you affect how you're going to do it.
I wanted to, so going back to my poem from earlier, it was based off of this quote. When you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she cannot go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her little eyes, and see the depressing clouds of inferiority begin to form in her little mental sky, and see her begin to distort her little personality by unconsciously developing a bitterness towards white people. Quote, "Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean?" I feel like as I was writing this poem, it was really difficult because I've only had a discussion with my family very few times about the police and like how to handle police and what to do when you get pulled over and whatever. But I feel like when writing something like this, you have to see it from like a parent's point of view, because you truly don't understand like what's going to happen to that child in the future, what's going to happen if all of this continues to get worse, and what's going to happen if it gets better, or will it even get better? And moving to general reflection questions, is it possible that there has been a repeat in history?
I think that not only has history repeated itself, but like it never stopped. To this day, Black people have to fear for their life for the sole reason that they're Black. And this goes for all people of color, really. We see white people not being held accountable for their actions, while people of color are held on like a different standard. We just started listening to Black people, and a majority of the people who were listening didn't even care. The more they don't listen, the more the problem won't stop.
If that's all of the answers for the first question, thank you, Stacy, for that answer. Another question I wanted to pose is, do you think there should be any expectations to those who break unjust laws, regardless if it is a law?
I can answer this question. I just want to say that a law really should be something that protects all communities, and it's something that should keep all communities safe. And if something isn't doing that, if something is intentionally designed to oppress minority communities and put them at the bottom, can you really call it a law? Because to me, that doesn't seem like a law. That seems like a mechanism of oppression. And so to me, I think that if you find a law that's oppressive, or if you find systems that may be the norm, but are oppressive, you have every right to fight back against it. And sure, not everyone will be happy. That does kind of go back to what we were talking about with the white moderate who prefers order. That order comes from systems of oppression that have kept them safe or made them feel safe because they've been able to keep their privilege and power. But that doesn't mean that we can't fight back against those oppressive systems. And kind of like what was mentioned in the question, they're not always laws too. They could be unwritten societal norms. They could be things at your school that you find unjust. But what's important is that you fight back against it. Because if you think about it, there are many times where what we would now consider like basic human rights were illegal. Like there was a time when it would have been illegal for a Black person to sit in the same place as a white person, even though now that would seem so absurd. And there was a time when it was illegal for two people of the same gender to get married or show PDA or anything like that, even though they have that right. So I think it's important to remember that even the language of law, I think, shows how we have kind of, as a society, accepted oppressive systems as like the framework of our society, when really we should be pushing back against them.
So for me, my question is that Martin Luther King Jr. and that Frederick Douglass both have like similar ways that they write things and similar ways that they go about things, in my own personal opinion. So my question is, why does Martin and Frederick believe using examples in their own life experiences is going to change the outcome that they are experiencing?
I don't know if I'm going to answer this correctly, but I think that when you put out a experience or something that you've personally encountered, I feel like, especially with something like something that has to do with injustice, I feel like the intentions behind it are to show the public what is going on within the system as someone who's being oppressed, and showing them like, hey, this is actually going on. We need to fix it. We need to change it. And I feel like with using their life experiences from people who have the ability to put this out towards people, I feel like they wanted to express that when it comes to racial injustices, we are in like a grave situation. And I feel like they wanted to, I mean, again, show that we needed to change, and they wanted the public to be able to see what's going on and to feel that sympathy and to feel what they're feeling and to understand that something needs to be done. I hope I answered that right.
You did. I think what I'm trying to like, I guess, say or wonder is just that knowing that Martin Luther King Jr., especially even Frederick Douglass, they experienced and that they had other, like, I guess, setbacks for them. And especially nowadays, knowing that racism seems to be smaller, even though it's still there and it's hard to see. You got things like Rodney King and how he was basically brutally murdered, or George Floyd and how he was suffocated to death. And you have people who watch those videos and they see the examples of how racial oppression is seriously, systematic racial discrimination is seriously still a thing. And yet they sit there and they second guess that and they tell us that, oh, well, they were in their right minds and they had every opportunity and they had every right to do this because such and such happened. It's just, for me, it's just like, I wonder, seeing those experiences and letting people know of the world that as people of color and skin go through, that they see every day. It's just, do you fear that it's not gonna that change is not gonna happen? That's necessarily starts becoming not much of a possibility, that this is just the world that we live in and we have to get used to it. Do you think that we must accept it? I guess I don't.
I want to speak on Bianca's part. Like the change, I don't really feel like we just have to keep going. Like I feel like the change isn't gonna I don't know, they what people, non-white people, non-people of color could say change and like would help, but like some people say Black Lives Matter, and then the others, like other people says Blue Lives Matter and stuff like that, and I'm just like, well, where's the support? Like there's no type of support. And it's crazy because like this just came up in my mind on February 6th again, when a girl was just walking down the street past the little Trump thing going on, and she literally got jumped by a whole bunch of big white people, like big black big white people, and it's just like men at that, getting spit on, ripping her hair out. And I feel like that's so, like, literally they shown us how they really are in real life. Like they gave us a prime example of how they treat us and how they care. They don't care obviously, but it's just like crazy to me how we like continuously have to deal with this when we've been like dealing with this for like years, decades, and so much racism going on. I feel like we just really have to protect ourselves at this point, because we don't have, like, some white people do care, and others really shown how they care about us in the world. So I feel like at this point we all have to really come together, like the Black Lives Matter movement. So I just feel like I don't know what we could do. It's like I don't know, and every day is something new. So you have to like, oh, am I gonna get stopped today, or am I gonna everything, like you don't know what's gonna happen dealing with this, because people are still like want to get revenge because Joe Biden is in office. Like there's like it just blows my mind thinking about that.
So my question is, have you ever demanded those of higher power to create change, and what did this look like?
I could answer that question. On a large scale, unfortunately, I haven't been able to make change through talking to people in higher power, simply because as youth, like there's only so much that you can do. But I have tried creating change in my own school environment, which is of course Hinckley, and I feel like I have been successful. And I work in coalition with Ashley, so part of this change can also be attributed to Ashley as well. But for one of them, so I noticed that there was a lack of representation of the Asian community at Hinckley, and I felt like during these times where the Asian community has been undermined, I thought it was important that we would shine light on the community even in our own school, because Asian Americans only make up so few of the demographic of students at Hinckley. So I emailed the person who oversees all of the clubs, and I wasn't like, hey, like, can I even make a club? I didn't say that. I was like, I want to make a club, like, and I need to let this happen. And coincidentally, there was another teacher who was also doing or planning to make a club the same time I was. So we just kind of merged ideas together. But slowly, unfortunately, due to the virtual learning and the virtual environment that we're in, we haven't had much participation, but we are slowly gaining more participation. But through the club that I worked with the sponsor to create, I've been able to, we are planning to do an event for the Culture Fest. And I feel like with that, we are shining more light on the Asian community and just showing others the beauty of it. But there's also other things that we have done, like for NHS, we are planning a town hall, and we were planning to invite the superintendent Rico Munn because he has more power to actually make change within the Aurora Public School District. And we are calling action upon him. So with that, I feel like we are also making a change in that sense as well.
I can also answer this question. I guess I'll answer it two ways. Like, I guess locally, school, just to go back to what Jason said, I'm in a lot, which is African American Ladies of Tomorrow. And we got shot down a lot last year during Black History Month, just to like, you know, show, just to, you know, take the month and like show what we wanted to show. It was a lot of pushback. And my cousin who went to Hinckley and graduated in 2017 said that also happened to her. So it wasn't a new thing. This year, I guess, since it's virtual, it's gotten better and they are more willing, I guess, to give us time to shine. But with like demanding those of higher power, I guess, in a big sense, I haven't like talked to, you know, oh, well, I was about to say I haven't talked to a representative, but that would be false. But I haven't like talked to like the president or whatever, but I noticed these things whenever the election was going on or whenever any election is going on. It's just a lot of, and this kind of goes back to the white moderate type conversation we were having, but a lot of pandering that it really gets to me. Or it's just like performative, I guess. So whenever people do want to create change, like I guess this past election, it was like, what would you do to stop the systemic racism that's obviously very prevalent? I wanted, because of like the past things that, past promises that were given to like Black people and how they fell short, I wanted to believe like what I guess the candidates were saying, but there was still a part of me that just couldn't and still thought that it was either pandering or just performative. I guess basically what I'm trying to say is like, with creating change, there's kind of two ways or two strategies that I've kind of noticed within like, and this is more, I guess, with politics, but it could be really applied anywhere, is that they rarely go through with the actual plan they want, the actual plan that people have demanded for. And if they do go through with it, it's less beneficial than you would assume it is. Like, for example, the crime bill in 1994, I think. And so I guess my thing for that is just like, it looks pretty much the same, like with the same two strategies. And it's kind of sad that how we have to like keep asking for change, but still be, or for me at least, still be reluctant when they say that change will happen because of just how many times in the past that change was, you know, the idea of change was taken advantage of. And so, yeah, that's my, I guess, thoughts about that question.
Just like something small. I know I've been talking a lot. Like going on with Ashley and Jason, like I go to Hinckley as well. And to a lot of schools for like 2 years, I go to a new school. I just don't like being at one school. But Hinckley like really showed me that they say that we get some support, but like they don't really fulfill, like go all the way through, you know? Am I just the only one that feels like that? Like even I went to, I played basketball for East, and they're all like, they're so, any idea you have, they're gonna support it. And I feel like at Hinckley it's so different, especially how many Black people go to that school. I would think that if a Black person or a Black student or whatever is saying, oh, I want to make change, they should support it instead of just like pushing us along, like Rico. I mean, like, he's a good, person to talk to, but like genuinely in my eyes, like he could say a lot, but like his actions don't, so I feel like I understand what you guys are going through at that school.
Thank you, Valeria. Jason, next. That was very, very well said. And so I have one last reflection question for us tonight, and that is, how do you think non-Black allies to the Black community can better serve movements of racial equality so that they don't embody the white moderate that King describes? And so that can really mean any non-Black community. It can mean the white community, but it can also mean communities of color that don't identify as Black.
I can answer this. So I think, sorry, I think to better serve like the Black community, and really start getting like change with all these movements going on, not only do you yourself as an individual have to be like educated, but I think part of that education is like listening to Black people's like stories and what they have to say. And even if you are, for example, part of a group that is not Black, like I'm gonna use the Hispanic / Latinx community, because I'm part of that. Like a lot of them, if you call them out for their like colorism or their like anti-Black like tendencies or stuff like that, they get very defensive and they're like, oh, but like I'm a minority too and stuff like that. And I'm like, that still doesn't make it okay. And you need to be able to take that criticism and change like your opinions and your like what you do / your actions but sorry, you need to like change your actions and not get offended by that, but instead listen. And also like not only listening to these stories, but trying to support them, even though you yourself don't have to be like vocal about it. Because like I said, again, using like the Hispanic community, we have, although we're both minorities, we both have very different struggles and like different examples of like racism towards us. So I think it just comes down to being able to listen to Black people and supporting them while not trying to like push them out of their own space.
Thank you, Valeria. I think you brought up a good point, and I can definitely relate to that a lot because I see a lot of anti-Blackness in the Indian community and in the Asian community, to where like people like to use racial stereotypes and make jokes and try and say things that are negative in terms of Black people. And so I think it's so important to call them out, because just because we are racial minorities does not mean that we are exempt from racism. It's so important that we call anti-Blackness within our own communities, because we can't let that flourish. That's not something that I would stand for in my community, and that's not something I'm going to let stand in my community. And you also did bring up an interesting point about colorism, because I think that's something else that I see a lot in my own community. Like, I've been told a lot that I need to use bleaching creams, and I think that also kind of reflects this fear of anti-whiteness and like not embodying the white ideal by having darker skin. So I think even questioning those elements of white supremacy, because like I know personally, I know that colorism within the Indian community stems from British colonialism, and in a time when Indians were rewarded more for looking like British people. And so making sure that you try and question those, like speak up when your family member says, hey, you should use bleaching cream and things like that. So
To answer the question, I also wanted to say that I want people who, sorry. Sorry, but I feel like it's important, for example, a person who's anti-Black or who's racist towards Black people or just POC in general to be honest about it and let me educate them on that topic. And I'd also want people, specifically white people, to, rather than joining the movement out of pity, join because they genuinely want a change, because I feel like that's something that could really give us a boost, because not only is it just Black people or just people who are also minorities, but we also have white people joining us on this, and it should be a teamwork. It should be a teamwork. And I feel like we shouldn't limit to just Black people, or we shouldn't just limit to these groups to fight and fend for themselves, because we are all collectively fighting for peace within each other.
Sorry, I just wanted to touch on one quick thing with this question. Just the simple fact that pro-Black does not mean anti everything else, like anti-white, anti-Asian. It does not mean Black Lives Matter does not mean all lives don't matter. Like, just understanding that would be like a great first step onto like helping or educating yourself to serve the movement. So just saying that.
Yeah, lastly, I just kind of wanted to touch on like the idea that like just like this idea of like white supremacy as a whole, it impacts us all in one way or another. So like the dismantling of it, like no matter if you're white, Black, Asian, whatever, it's going to end up benefiting you in the long run. So I don't know, like that's like the best mentality to go into allyship with. It's like, you know, we're tied to each other in this system as well.
Is everything okay with me closing this off? Okay. My reflections from our time together is that we all obviously want change. And I really do think that we're the generation to do that, because we're talking about it so young and we're realizing it, and we already have a bunch of ideas on how to do that.
I'd also want to talk about our call to action from our time together should be to recognize how important actions are. I think what we've talked about today, I think if there's a central theme to it, it's that saying that you support anti-racism efforts and saying that you are supporting racial equality is not enough. It's like, it's not enough to post a black square on your Instagram or whatever. Like, you need to actually show that you care through your actions, whether that's trying to support the Black community, whether that's participating in protests, whether that's advocating for change, whether that's at your school, at your workplace, or in the government. It's so important that you show really that you care about these efforts and show that this is something that's important to you, because ultimately we can only take your words at face value. Your actions, I think, are what are the proof of the pudding.
Very well said, Rohan. There's been so many amazing things said today. But now for closing remarks, I just want to thank everybody who's taking time out of their day to be here. Often in YASPA events, we say, my liberation is tied to your liberation. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and I hope you have a lovely night.
I'm that, yeah. Been that, still that. Will forever be that, forever be that. Yeah, I'm the hood Mona Lisa, break a nigga into pieces. Had to X some cheesy niggas out my circle like a pizza. I'm way too exclusive. I don't shop on Insta boutiques. All them little clothes only fit fake booties. Bad bill talking cash. Be like water. I'm a mother and relaxing. I would never trip on a if I had him. That's my trash. You the maid, so you bagged him. I'm a savage. Classy, bougie, ratchet. Sassy, moody, nasty. Acting stupid. What's happening? What's happening? I'm a savage. Yeah. Classy, bougie, ratchet. Yeah. Sassy. Hacking, stupid. What's happening? What's happening? Eat me and record it, but your edge up all I'm showing. I keep my private, so it's AP all I'm showing. Beefing with you just really getting kind of boring. If it ain't about the money, then you know I'm gonna ignore it. I'm the shit. I know.
Thank you all to our panelists. I just wanted to say thank you. I had to end with that because I heard one of the young people say that. So again, thank you all, and you all have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank you.